Hey guys, what's going on? It's Andy again from andybaker.com and owner of Kingwood Strength and Conditioning. And we're coming to you today with another instructional video on the stiff-legged deadlift versus the Romanian deadlift. Okay, two exercises that are often used interchangeably in the gym and also with the terminology. So sometimes if you read in the literature, you'll see programs that say Romanian deadlifts, some that say stiff-legged deadlifts, and a lot of people are not sure which one is which or why you would do one over the other. So first and foremost, we'll talk about why you would do either of these exercises. And basically it's very simple. It's a less stressful way of deadlifting. As many of you guys know, as an intermediate or advanced trainee, you can only deadlift really heavy so often. Some guys can get away with a little bit more frequency than others. But most of us, if we deadlift too heavy too often, we're going to experience a little bit of overtraining and often a regression effect. So, but we still want to maintain some pulling frequency in our programming, and the Romanian deadlift and the stiff-legged deadlift allow us to do that. So both of these exercises are very similar, and they can often be used in your programming interchangeably from time to time without too much of a difference. There are some key differences that you need to be aware of, just in case you want to go this route and start implementing these variations into your training. But both of these exercises, what they do is they essentially take the quads out of the movement. They don't isolate anything, but they do remove a big portion of muscle mass out of the movement and force the hamstrings, the glutes, and the low back to do the majority of the work. Okay, so anytime you're doing a lift and you're training less muscle mass, it's going to mean you're using less weight, and therefore the stress on your overall system, on your central nervous system, is going to be less. And that's the main reason why we would want to choose these exercises, is because it allows us to pull relatively heavy but with less of a strain on our central nervous system, and that's going to help us build up our frequency. So if it was in a very simple world, we would just be able to always just deadlift 2 or 3 days a week and still make progress. But other than a very rank novice, that's not usually the case, and usually we're going to have to cut down on our frequency on the heavy deadlifts, and we're going to start having to use lighter pulling variations. And the stiff-legged deadlift and the Romanian deadlift can be very useful additions to your program when used this way. So we're going to go over just some components of each of these exercises. So just for starters is the abbreviations. You'll see this in the literature all the time. Instead of writing out stiff-leg deadlift or Romanian deadlift, you'll also often see SLDL or RDL. So it's just to save a little bit of time when you're writing these things down. It's pretty common in the strength training literature to see that. So if you see it, that's what it means. One of the main differences is the starting position for the two lifts, okay? A stiff-legged deadlift is going to always start from the floor, just like a regular deadlift will. It starts on the floor from a dead stop, and you're going to reset all of your reps, just like you would on a deadlift. You're going to start the weight off the floor, lift it up, you're going to lower it down, come to a complete pause, reset into proper pulling mechanics, and lift again. So there's going to be a brief pause in between each rep, okay? And that's a very important distinction from the Romanian deadlift, which we say starts from the hang, okay? And the hang position is going to be with the weight held at approximately waist height. That's going to be the starting position, is in a standing position with the weight in the hang. And we're going to lower the weight down, and regardless of how far down we lower the weight, we're going to be using a stretch reflex, okay? So we're not going to be pausing the weight at the bottom of the repetition on the Romanian deadlift, okay? And that's a that may be the most critical distinction between the two, because anytime you're starting from the floor and you're pulling all of your reps from a dead stop, that's going to be a much, much more stressful event on your central nervous system than an exercise that uses the stretch reflex, okay? So of the two, the stiff-legged deadlift is going to be a much more taxing exercise than is the Romanian deadlift. And that's really regardless of the amount of weight. Some people can do more weight on a Romanian deadlift than they can on a stiff-legged deadlift, but the effect on the nervous system is different. So the weights will generally be somewhat close on the two exercises if the range of motion is similar, but the Romanian deadlift, because we use the stretch reflex, is going to be a much less significant training stress than is the stiff-legged deadlift, okay? So starting from the floor, but these can also be done from a 2 to 4 inch deficit. Okay, you'll see on the video that I demonstrated a a set pulled just from the floor like you would a normal deadlift. But if you want a little bit of an increased range of motion, a little bit more stretch on the hamstrings, a longer range of motion, so more work on the hamstrings, you can stand on a 2 to 4 inch deficit, and that's usually good for any type of build. Much more than that is probably not going to be effective and might even be dangerous. But this is, you'll see this often where lifters are standing on a 2 to 4 inch deficit to increase the range of motions, and that's just a brutal way to strengthen your hamstrings. Romanian deadlifts are often done for a partial range of motion, okay? Originally, this was a popular exercise mainly for Olympic lifters because it strengthened the second pull. So they could overload the second pull with a much heavier load than they would be doing in a clean or a snatch. Okay, so a lot of times what we'll see is we'll start from the hang, and you'll see in the video where I demonstrated some reps where you're just lowering down to just below knee height. Okay, so you're gonna go just maybe an inch or two below the knees and come back up. So a fairly short range of motion, and the shorter range of motion will really allow you to overload with some heavy weight, okay? It's approximately the range of motion as a rack pull, but again, because you're not initiating all of the repetitions from a dead stop like you would in a rack pull, it's much less stressful than a rack pull. You're using the stretch reflex to lower it down and bring it back up. So a much easier way to train the pulling motion than a rack pull is. But if you're more flexible and you can get down further, you can take a Romanian deadlift, and I did a video of this as well. You can take a Romanian deadlift all the way down to the floor, or you can stand on a platform and you can take a Romanian deadlift down as, again, off of like a 2 to 4 inch deficit, or a lot of gyms even have a platform you can stand on where you can take the weight out of the rack, start from the hang, and you can basically lower it down all the way to the top of your feet if you have the flexibility to do that. So the Romanian deadlift can be done in a pretty wide spectrum in terms of range of motion. It can be done partial reps just below the knee, or it can be done all the way down to the top of your shoes. But either way, you're going to be doing the exercise with a stretch reflex. As far as how to program the two exercises, and this is where you need to understand how these exercises create stress and the nature of the stress, is how to fit them into your template. So I gave some examples here of how you might fit these exercises into different types of training splits. So a stiff-legged deadlift, I like to use it a lot of times on a medium day in a heavy, light, medium routine, okay? So in the heavy, light, medium routine, your heavy day would obviously be regular deadlifts, and then your light day might be something really light like power cleans, or you might not pull at all. You might do something like chins, something like that. But then on your medium day, your pulling exercise could be a stiff-legged deadlift, okay? Makes a great addition to a medium day, okay? It can also be used like if you're using a Texas method type routine, whether it's a 4-day Texas method or a 3-day Texas method, the stiff-legged deadlift can be a really good volume day pulling variation. So if on your high intensity day you want to deadlift for anywhere from like a single set of 1 to 5 reps, on your volume day you want to accumulate some pulling volume, a stiff-legged deadlift for say like 3 sets of 5 is a very good way to accumulate pulling volume in a way that doesn't overly tax your system. So a lot of us, especially those of us that are a little bit older, we're not able to really pull with a lot of explosive power on an exercise like a power clean or a power snatch. So we can't do a lot of weight on a power clean or a power snatch relative to our deadlift. So in a lot of the Texas method routines, you'll see power cleans and power snatches used as a pulling day volume variation. But if you're not able to do a lot of weight on a power clean or a power snatch, it's not going to have a lot of carryover to your deadlift, okay? So again, you need to be able to train that pulling variation with enough weight to actually generate some stress. And so if you're not very good at power cleans, you're not very good at power snatches, if you're getting a little bit older like I am, you kind of lose that explosive power, and your power clean doesn't really keep up with your deadlift that well. So a lot of times a stiff-legged deadlift can be a better variation to accumulate volume on a volume day in the Texas method. So in these first two examples, we had the stiff-legged deadlift being used on a different day than the deadlift, but you can also do them on the same day. Okay, this is a way that I really like to do this, where we'll have a lifter work up to a top set on the deadlift, say anywhere from 1 to 5 reps, and then we'll pull some weight off of the bar. Say he works up to 500 pounds for a set of 5 on the deadlift. We might pull it off to say 405 and have the lifter do anywhere from 2 to 3 sets of stiff-legged deadlifts right after he gets done deadlifting. And this might be better than having him do lots of sets across on a regular deadlift, which might be too stressful on his nervous system to recover from. So again, it's a way to accumulate some volume with a little bit less stress on the nervous system to ensure that you're not overtraining. Okay, so very, very good way to add back offset volume to your deadlifts. If you get strong enough on a stiff leg deadlift, it can actually be used as an alternate exercise to the deadlift every other week. So some lifters do much better with lower deadlift frequency. They do a little bit better when they use variations of the deadlift week to week rather than deadlifting every single week. So a very simple way to do this would just be week 1, you're going to deadlift, say, up to a top set of 5, and then week 2, you're going to do stiff leg deadlifts for, say, 3 sets of 5. And you would just alternate that every other week. Now, in order for that to work, you have to be fairly strong on the stiff leg deadlift. So you're going to have to spend a few months probably doing the exercise and getting fairly strong on it before you can use it to actually supplant the deadlift every other week. Okay, but that also works for the stiff-legged deadlift. Romanian deadlift, we already talked about starting from the hang. We already talked about the range of motion. But because this is a little bit less stressful than a stiff-legged deadlift, you can use this on a light or a medium day. So like in a heavy, light, medium type routine, this could be used as a light day or a medium day exercise. So usually it doesn't generate enough stress to where it can't be used on a light day. So, and sometimes it feels good after maybe heavy deadlifting on Monday to do some lighter RDLs on your light day. It kind of stretches out your back a little bit. But again, it is stressful enough if you use enough volume, if you use enough sets and reps. It can also be used as a volume day stressor. So in the same way that you use the stiff leg deadlift on your volume day, you can also use it. You can also use the RDL on your volume day. Again, back offsets, the same way that we use the stiff leg deadlift, you can also do a Romanian deadlift. So you work up to, say, a top set of 5 on the deadlift, pull some weight off, and do, say, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 8, something like that as an RDL to add some pulling volume after your main deadlift set. So the main reason you would pick one over the other is simply the amount of stress it creates. If you need more stress, if you need to add in a lot of stress to your pulling variations to get your deadlift going, you're going to want to go with the stiff leg deadlift. If you need to be careful with the amount of pulling volume that you add, if you don't recover so well from frequent, very heavy deadlifting, you might do better with an RDL. But I would recommend that all of you guys, if you don't have a lot of experience with either, to just try both and see which one you like, see how your mechanics hold up, see your soreness pattern afterwards, see how your deadlift workout goes in the subsequent workouts that follow doing this, and then just kind of go by feel. So it's very individual thing. Some lifters do better with one or the other. You might choose to implement both of them in your training at various times. So a couple of frequently asked questions that apply to both of these. One is how much knee bend, okay? So a lot of people will call the stiff-legged deadlift a straight-legged deadlift, okay? So in some of the literature, you'll see it stiff legs referred to as straight legs. Neither of these exercises are done with straight legs. There is some knee flexion in both of these movements, okay? You are going to have a little bit of knee bend in there, but we want a minimal amount of knee bend because the more you bend your knees, the more you're going to be bringing your quads into the movement, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to do these movements without a lot of contribution from the quadriceps. We're trying to make the hamstrings, glutes, and the low back do the majority of the work, okay? So how much knee bend do you use? The answer to that is as the minimal amount possible while able to hold your back into extension, okay? So these can be dangerous exercises if done incorrectly. So you need to be able to hold your back into rigid extension the whole time that you're doing these movements. If you have to unlock your knees a little bit more in order to keep your back nice and flat, your back is going to take priority over the knee bend. Okay, the more that you do these, the more that you're going to limber up a little bit, and the straighter you'll be able to keep your knees while keeping your back into extension. Okay, but if you find that you can't get down into position to pick up a stiff-legged deadlift, or you're not able to lower a Romanian deadlift very far without your back going into flexion, then you need to unlock your knees a little bit more, and that's gonna free up. Okay, that's gonna free up your lower back to stay into extension. Okay, so that's the answer to how much knee bend is the minimal amount to keep your back locked into extension. Okay, Sets and reps, how many sets and reps? This can vary widely depending on the individual lifter and the type of program that they're following. So just in general, I would say anywhere from 1 to 5 sets. So if you're using it for back off work, you could do anywhere from 1 to 2 sets of back off work following the heavier deadlifts. If you're using it, say, as a supplanting your deadlift every other week, or you're using it, say, on a volume day, you could do anywhere from 3 to 5 sets, okay? So it kind of depends on how you're using the exercises. Rep range, I would say 3 to 8, okay? I would not try to do 1 RM testing on either of these movements. It puts the hamstring is in a very elongated, somewhat vulnerable position, especially on a stiff leg deadlift. So I would not be trying to pull 1 rep maxes on a stiff legged deadlift. I would cut it off at 3. And that's just going to keep the weight low enough so that you're not going to get injured. So breaking a very, very, very heavy weight off of the floor without a lot of contribution from the quads is putting a lot of tension on your hamstrings. And so pulling a really, really heavy single or double is probably not a good idea. So I would say minimum 3 reps, maximum of 8 reps. If you're using them more for work capacity or hypertrophy, you might go up into doing sets of 8. I do a lot of sets at 8 reps for deadlifts or stiff leg deadlifts and RDL. So a little bit easier to do higher reps than it is, say, on a regular deadlift for a set of 8. So the other question is on grip, how to grip the bar. You can use basically any variation that you want. If you don't have issues with grip on a deadlift, so if you're a competitive power lifter, or even if you're just kind of a hardcore lifter in the gym, and you don't have issues losing your heavy deadlifts because of your grip, I don't care if you use straps or not. Typically, if I'm pulling any kind of deadlift for a lot of volume, I'm going to use straps because it saves your nervous system. If you do all of your deadlifting work, all of your back off work, all of your volume work, all of your deadlift variations, if you never use straps for any of that and you're pulling with a relatively high amount of frequency, it's gonna eat into your central nervous system a little bit. So I use straps whenever I do volume or whenever I do a lot of frequency on my pulling. So you can use straps on these with double overhand grip. Again, that's if you don't have grip issues. If you have grip issues with your heaviest deadlifts, then you probably ought to train with a hook grip or a alternate grip on this to make sure that your grip is getting some work. So hook grip or alternate grip also works. You can do, if you're good at hooking, hook grip is probably better for stiff legs and RDLs, but you can use an alternate as well if you're not good with the hook grip. Don't try to do these double overhand. You're going to limit the amount of weight that you can use doing a double overhand grip. So it's a hamstring, glute, low back exercise, not a grip exercise. So don't limit the amount of load you can use by doing a double overhand grip, because the difference can be several hundred pounds. So do what you need to hang on to the bar. So that is a stiff leg deadlift versus an RDL. So hopefully it helped. And let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Thanks a lot, guys.